Hi, I'm Barbara Lucas, and welcome to the Green Room, where we explore the environmental topics that green up our world. Something we don't always think about are the toxins that may be in the household products which we come in contact with each day. HealthyStuff.org is a useful resource which maintains the largest publicly available database of toxic chemicals in consumer products. Our guest, Jennifer Cavasser, an environmental health organizer with the Ecology Center and with the Michigan Network for Children's Environmental Health, works in conjunction with HealthyStuff.org. Jennifer is here to tell us about toxins that may be in some common household products. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We're going to start out by showing a video that is about your project, HealthyStuff.org.
We like to think of our home as a haven, a safe place to raise our families. The stuff we've purchased for our homes, our electronics, furniture, shower curtains, children's products, and pet toys. They're safe too, right? Well, they should be, but unfortunately, many of the most innocent-looking items in our homes contain toxic chemicals that have been linked to a range of health problems, including cancer, developmental disabilities, and reproductive problems. The Ecology Center and the Michigan Network for Children's Environmental Health have tested over 7,000 consumer products using a handheld XRF device shown here, and unfortunately have found many chemicals of concern, including lead, arsenic, mercury, and cadmium. Children's products and toys are no exception.
So it's over the arsenic limit as well.
In fact, over 1/3 of the children's products and toys tested contained high levels of toxic chemicals. Some of the results were surprising. For instance,
the orange block has twice the amount of lead, arsenic, and chromium than the red one. The red one is considered toxic, but this orange is extremely toxic. Who would know just by looking at them? This one, in fact, has high levels of lead, and this one does not. There's really no way to tell. You can't tell by looking at them, by touching them, by smelling them, by brand, by country of origin. The yellow and the red pieces of this toy have very high levels of lead, arsenic, and even mercury. This ducky has over 15,000 parts per million of lead.
this is especially worrisome because children are more vulnerable to the effect of toxins compared to adults. What happens when a young child tees on a toy that's coated with cadmium or sleeps on a mattress that's full of toxic flame retardants? Hard to say, but why take the risk? All consumer products, but especially children's products, should be made from safe materials that don't pose a health risk to a child's fragile, developing brain and body. What's more important than the health of our children and families?
Jennifer, the video shows that you have already tested over 5,000 different products. Now, why is it that you've been doing so many different tests? Aren't we here in America safe to feel that the things that we're buying are safe for us?
Yeah, a lot of people do think that if they're on the shelf of a store that, you know, if it's being sold to us, the products are safe for use, but in fact that's not the case, and many of the products that are on sale today for us to purchase contain chemicals that are known to cause various health impairments, including cancer, developmental disorders, and reproductive problems. And you asked about, you know, testing thousands of products and why. It's mainly to raise awareness. We think consumers should be informed of what's in our products, not only for their own individual health, but for the health of our environment, and also for the health of future generations. And so it's kind of a way to empower consumers to take this knowledge and then, you know, either choose safer products or alternative products.
Mm-hmm. And what are the laws that are on the books these days to protect us about this?
Yeah, well, it's just one law really that hasn't been updated in nearly 36 years, and it's called the Toxic Substances Control Act. And it really—
Is that a federal law?
Yes, it is. And it's really kind of the only federal piece of legislation that looks at you know, comprehensive chemical policy, and it has allowed over 80,000 chemicals on the market, most of which have not been tested for health or safety information. And so these chemicals are being put into our products, and we're coming into contact with them, and you know, it's exposing us and potentially increasing our risk for health effects.
What would you like to see in terms of legislation?
Well, fortunately, a bill has recently been introduced just in the last maybe 2 or 3 weeks. So it's called the Safe Chemicals Act of 2011. And it's really exciting because we're hoping that it could possibly reform and update the Toxic Substances Control Act. And so that's what we're working on, is reform of this bill. And we're hoping that chemicals would be tested for health and safety information before they're widely released onto the market. We're also hoping that the most persistent, bioaccumulative, and toxic chemicals would be phased out of products. So it would be taking more of a precautionary principle on making sure that chemicals are safe before we're exposed to them.
Mm-hmm. And would it require that the labels of the products say anything about what's inside?
I'm not sure specifically on that bill whether it would require labeling. I don't think so. It would be more to do with the manufacturers having to test these chemicals and making sure that they're safe for for humans to come in contact with and so forth before they're actually being put out on the market. So it shouldn't require labeling in terms of this federal bill.
Mm-hmm. Isn't there some kind of Michigan legislation that's being proposed that would address labeling?
Yeah, the Michigan Network for Children's Environmental Health is currently working at the state level to try to pass a bill on safe children's products. And what this would do potentially would provide families and consumers here in Michigan with the right to know about toxics in kids' products. Mm-hmm. So right now, if these pair of rubber boots, for example, they have very high levels of lead in them, but there's really, if you were to go to a toy store, you'd never, or wherever you get these, there's no way to know that they have lead. And then if we pass this legislation, it would provide us with the access to this information where we could go online and look to see if they do contain these high levels of chemicals.
Mm-hmm. Seems like the right to know is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
You mentioned the precautionary principle earlier, mm-hmm. and I'm wondering, some people say that that is also a no-brainer, that we should only use products that we're absolutely sure are, chemicals that we're absolutely sure are safe.
Sure.
And then there's other people that suggest that if that's going to cost more, mm-hmm. we should forget it. Mm-hmm. How would you address that?
Well, I think that it's important to take a precautionary principle. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to absolutely prove any chemical is 100% safe, but we can definitely prove that some chemicals are safer than others and that some are very hazardous and should not be in consumers' products, especially in children's products. I think with the precautionary principle is that we really need to take that route. You see healthcare costs continue to rise. We have many types of diseases that are on the rise. A lot of these diseases that are on the rise are connected with certain chemicals. And
so it's the overall cost that we're not really
exactly
taking into account.
Yeah, and so we actually released a report last year titled "The Price of Pollution," and it looks at the environmentally attributable cost here in Michigan of some pediatric diseases that are attributed to environmental exposure. So we looked at asthma, pediatric cancer, neurodevelopmental disorders, and lead poisoning. And it costs the state here in Michigan, it's about $6 billion each year.
Wow.
And it's a very conservative estimate. And so you think about how much it would cost to have the precautionary principle in place, but let's think about what it costs to not have it in place.
Yeah. And also I was thinking, I noticed on your healthystuff.org website mm-hmm. that even though there's a high percentage of toys, for instance, that have these dangerous chemicals, there's also at least a third of them don't.
Yep.
So somebody's able to make these things without
yes.
these chemicals
yes.
and to sell them.
Yeah.
And the other thing I was thinking is, my children anyway had mm-hmm. way too many toys. If perhaps they didn't need so many cheap toys. I mean, that's
sure.
one reason I bought so many, is they were so cheap.
Sure.
Maybe I didn't really need them that cheap.
Sure. I want to go back to what you said about the 1/3 of children's products that are safe for kids. There are European countries and other countries that have stricter chemical laws than we do. Mm-hmm. And many of the larger companies and corporations are actually manufacturing safer products for the countries who have more stringent chemical policy laws, and then selling more toxic products to us because we have a more relaxed chemical policy law here in the States. So yes, there are definitely alternatives to toxics, and much of the time they're not necessary at all, and they can be easily replaced. but
we need to demand it.
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Voting power through our purchasing
Yes,
power.
definitely.
So let's get back to what kind of products is HealthyStuff.org testing?
We've tested a wide range of products, including children's toys, pet toys, a range of children's products, Christmas lights, home improvement items, cars. So the list kind of goes on, and it's very broad, and that's because toxics are found in many of these products. It's not just, one category.
Mm-hmm. And what are the methods of exposure? I noticed on your website it said that just because there's a chemical in a product doesn't mean you're necessarily going to get it inside you.
Definitely. And that's kind of what we say about HealthyStuff.org. We rate things that we've tested on high, medium, or low in terms of how high the chemicals are in the product and contamination level, but we can't say what the exposure is going to be. But the main method oftentimes is dust that you're exposed to it, because as the chemicals in products break down, they will come out of the product, and then they will attach to dust or other things that it's often dust, and then you inhale it. For children, a lot of times the source is the kids are chewing on it and things like that, and then they're ingesting it as exposure. So.
It kind of reminds me, you mentioned Christmas lights, and I had learned a while back that I think it's lead is in a lot of the older Christmas lights.
And the newer ones as well.
Are they?
Yeah.
Really? Oh, gosh. Well, I had at the time thought, well, I'm not going to be like putting Christmas lights in my mouth, and neither are children, so that's not an issue. But I did read, it said, you would need to make sure to wash your hands after you string the lights. And last Christmas, we were having a Christmas party, stringing lights, and everyone's eating Christmas cookies while they're decorating the tree. And I thought, oh my gosh, here we are doing exactly what we shouldn't be doing.
But it's so easy because it's a natural thing to do. But you're right, there's kind of 3 ways to be exposed: inhalation, absorption through the skin, which you're talking about, and then ingestion. And so it's definitely possible for chemicals to be absorbed through your skin as well.
Okay. And another thing I'd read is that I guess children, little kids anyway, frequently crawl around under a Christmas tree, and that's when they could be getting the dust and stuff. So sometimes it's not self-evident how a kid could get exposed.
Definitely. And actually, speaking of children on the floor, there was a study that was just released later this past week on chemicals, toxic flame retardants in carpet padding and recycled carpet padding. And so recycled carpet padding sounds like a great thing, right? It's recycled, it's eco-friendly, but in fact it has very high levels of penta and octa BDE, which is a toxic flame retardant that was banned many years ago. And so it's showing up in this recycled content, and if you're spending a lot of time on the floor, like infants and young kids, and even our dogs or cats, you're going to have much higher levels of this in your body.
Wow. So let's briefly mention, what are the different toxins that we're most concerned about in terms of children?
Well, there are many toxins that we should be concerned about, including flame retardants, phthalates that are often in PVC products, the heavy metals such as lead, cadmium, mercury, arsenic, and the endocrine disruptors. And so those chemicals that I just mentioned are associated with neurotoxicity, reproductive problems, thyroid problems, developmental disorders, and a range of cancers. So these have very serious health effects. And specifically, children are so susceptible to this, and so we kind of think about that. It's not just the dose of toxic chemicals that make the poison, but it's also the timing in one's life that makes the poison.
They're developing their brains.
Exactly, yeah, the development that's going on. Also, individual susceptibility. Some of us are more susceptible to the effects of chemicals than others.
Like some people are allergic and
exactly.
some people aren't. Okay.
Yeah, and then the interacting factors. So, if you're exposed to flame retardants and lead and, a few other things, how do they interact and then accumulate?
Kind of like when doctors say don't take these different medications together because they could have a toxic effect.
Sure. Same thing with chemicals. And when we look at accumulation, it's not like we accumulate them and then they're processed out of the body. Some chemicals are processed quickly, but some of them are persistent in our body. And so once we're exposed, they remain in the body for many years, and the effects may take years to occur.
You mentioned bioaccumulation earlier. Is that what you were referring to? Okay.
Yeah, so, and they've actually done body burden testing or biomonitoring where they test humans' blood, take hair samples, and collect urine, and they can detect many of these heavy, industrial chemicals in our bodies, and we pretty much all of us have them in our bodies.
Wow.
Which is scary.
Yeah. And it's especially hard to, I guess, prove why we're getting sick. I mean, because it's been over so many years and so many different things are inside of us.
And it's nearly impossible to establish causality. So if when you're exposed to so many thousands of chemicals constantly, every day, all the time, it's how do you narrow it down to one chemical or two chemicals even? It's really, there's such a variety of factors going on that it's hard to
Do you think
narrow.
that's one reason why the legislation is kind of weak, because the manufacturers really can't test? I mean, it's hard to prove that these things are dangerous?
No, I think that the legislation probably hasn't happened more because of the opposition is so strong and powerful.
Okay.
And we really need to do more on to advocate for safer products and safer policies because it's happening in other countries. Like I said, they're able to show which ones are safer and which ones aren't. And when I was saying, for us on an everyday kind of level, it's hard to establish causality, but they are able to test products and establish which ones are safer and which ones aren't. So I think it's more of the opposition, and it's just they're very powerful, and we need to speak up for and advocate for safer products.
Okay. Your healthystuff.org website is very useful, and there's a lot of different ways to use it. Maybe you could go over some of the different uses.
Yeah, well, there's a range of different categories. We have one on pets, so we've tested a range of pet items and pet toys for all those pet lovers to see, which toys are safe for their pet to use, which ones aren't. And there's also some on jewelry and women's accessories and kids' jewelry, for example, cars. And so I think the best way to kind of do it is to, go explore the website, see what's on there, see if any products that you have are on the site. You can also suggest items to us, and so if you don't see your product on our site, you can suggest it, and we might be able to bring it up.
Okay, good. I did notice that, for instance, in any topic category, they'll have the item that has the most chemicals and the item that has tested out with the least.
Sure.
So I thought that was really useful.
Yeah, you can categorize it. Yes.
And another thing I thought was interesting was that in the pet category, it said that there are no standards for chemicals in pet.
There aren't any.
I couldn't believe that.
I can't. It's hard to believe, especially as a dog lover. So, there's nothing there.
They mentioned that take tennis balls, for instance, that tennis balls that people use for sports don't have any lead in them. I think it was lead. And the tennis balls that are sold to dogs frequently have lead in them, like half of them or something. And it's the dogs that are putting them in their mouths.
Yeah.
And
it's worrisome.
a lot of dogs are dying of cancers. I did notice an article in the New York Times, I think it was yesterday, mentioned that golden retrievers have the highest rate of death by cancer. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, those guys love tennis balls.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not just tennis balls. You think about all the other things that they put in their mouths and how much time, again, they spend on the floor in close concentration or with dust. And so again, dust is a carrier for many of these toxic chemicals as they're being released from the products that we're using in our homes. And so you also think about some of the pet beds and things that they're sleeping on have been treated with very high levels of toxic flame retardants. That's another way exposure can occur for pets.
Speaking of mattresses or bedding, you showed me earlier some of the different mattresses that are being sold for tiny infants that have these high levels of, what are they that we're worried about?
PBDEs, and those are a type of very toxic flame retardant that are in many mattresses, not just for adults, but for babies and children. And so they're often made of foam, and they've been just they're overwhelmed with toxic flame retardants, and so you can imagine when an infant especially is sleeping on these things, how they could be exposed. And the toxic flame retardants that are in these mattresses and things, they are additive, and so I mean they're not bonded to the product itself, and so over time and with use and with wear, they're released from the product.
Yeah, foam breaks down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, old foam.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. And the child is on it for 8-10 hours
least,
at a time, breathing it.
Yep.
So can people, you know, is there any way except for your website to find out this kind of thing?
Well, I think it's great when consumers ask the companies themselves, like, are you using this product? And so it's a way to hold companies accountable and to demand safer products. And I would encourage consumers to do that. It's a way to speak up.
Okay. And what about in cars?
Well, cars are, it's funny because over time the cars have become safer, but they still remain 5 times more toxic environments than the home or than the office, for example. And I really think
5 times.
Yeah, they're considered to be pretty toxic in comparison. And the main
new car smell.
Yes.
Maybe we're not supposed to like it so well.
It's very true. That new car smell is actually a very toxic smell, and we've
Wow.
had a report that we published many years ago, the Ecology Center did, on the new car smell.
Really?
Yeah. And that's because much of the materials in there are made from PVC, phthalates, there's flame retardants in there, many other chemicals, and then you're in this enclosed space, you know, and so you're exposed to higher levels.
Wow.
But the Ecology Center, staff at the Ecology Center are working with different car companies, including Ford, to try to make safer products and to move towards sustainability and renewable materials that are safe for the environment and for people.
Isn't some of the foam Ford's using made out of soy or?
You know, I'm not sure,
Yeah.
but my colleagues, I'm sure, know.
I'm not sure either. I think I read that. But
Yeah.
makes me wonder whether you should put your car vent on getting external air. If you have your air conditioning on. I mean, people nowadays don't really drive around with their windows open much anymore.
Yeah, this is true. It would seem to make sense to bring in outside air.
Yeah. So what is the subject area that you have found the most levels of chemicals of concern?
Well, it would probably be jewelry, especially children's jewelry and accessories like purses and things like that.
Do
so
you have
those,
an example
yeah,
under
I
here
could
to show us?
show that. This is just, you know, kind of an innocent looking Hannah Montana bag. It doesn't look toxic at all. It looks, you know, kind of shiny, and a lot of little girls would probably be drawn to it. Exactly. Yeah. It actually contains very, very high levels of lead.
Wow.
And so you can imagine if you were a young child that were, you know, handling this, or, you know, possibly even putting it in your mouth, that you could possibly be exposed to lead through a purse. But so those are kind of the most, you know, the type of products that have higher levels of toxic chemicals in them. But we also want to think about accumulation again, because, you know, so that category might have the most, but then there's smaller doses coming from all these other types of products that we are using and coming into contact with every day. And then those chemicals accumulate and persist, and then we potentially have health effects.
Yeah, jewelry makes me think of how easy it is for a child to be sucking on their necklace.
Yeah.
Or, you know, their bracelets, or they just love teething those things.
Yeah, and cadmium is one of the metals that are most commonly in a lot of young kids' jewelries. Yeah, and so you can imagine a child just kind of chewing on cadmium potentially as they're playing with their necklace or something.
And then to think about the children that already have high levels, they're exposed to, say, lead in paints. So you've got kids that are, you know, I read some incredible statistic about the rate of children that are exposed to lead in Detroit. It's just incredible.
I believe it's either near 50% or perhaps even over 50%, so very high levels of blood levels.
And then the educational system is, you know, they don't have enough funding, and these kids are just, you know.
And in addition to that, children who are malnourished or not having, you know, don't have proper nutrition also suffer the effects of toxic chemicals much greater than a child who is properly, you know, has a proper healthy diet and things like that. So, again,
Double whammy,
Yep.
triple whammy.
Exactly.
Wow. Well, we're kind of running out of time, so maybe you could just let us know the different websites that you think people could go to. And we'll also have these websites linked at the Green Room website, so if they don't catch it now, they can get it later.
Well, the first that we've been talking about is healthystuff.org, and that's kind of our database of products that we've tested for toxics. The second is the Ecology Center website, and that's a site that kind of goes over the different programs, environmental programs that we're working on as a whole nonprofit organization. And
Ecocenter.org.
Yes, ecocenter.org, thank you.
That memorized.
And then the last one is the Michigan Network for Children's Environmental Health, and that's www.mnceh.org. And that's a coalition of groups around the state that are dedicated to reducing childhood exposure to toxics.
Great. Well, keep up the good work. We're really glad you're doing this.
Thank you.
For links and resources relevant to this show, visit ewashtenaw.org/greenroom. Thanks for joining us here today in the Green Room.